morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, introducing myself, my name is Asma Al-Shamdari. I'm a respiratory therapist in Fahad City. Today, inshallah, in this presentation, I'll be explaining mechanical ventilation modes. So, the objectives of this presentation will be, first, we're going to define the mechanical ventilation modes. Then, we're going to talk about the mood classification systems. And then we're going to talk about the set settings and the measured settings. Then we're going to take a review of categories maps of moods. Then we're going to talk about different moods, such as starting from the basic moods, control moods, moving on to the most new moods. So we're going to talk about control mood, continuous mandatory moods. We're going to talk about continuous spontaneous moods, synchronized intermittent moods, and we're going to talk about adaptive pressure control moods, and last but not least, we're going to talk about patient control moods. Okay, so starting with defining mechanical moods. What are the mechanical moods? So the mechanical moods are basically programs that are designed and programmed in the ventilator machine to do what? To do a function or delivery for the mechanical breath. And these moods are different from each other to manage a different critical cases in the intensive care units. These moods are classified with three classification systems. We have control variables, we have mechanical breath type, and we have phase variable. And we're going to talk in details in the coming slides. So we're going to start with the control variables. So each mood are divided into either controlling pressure or controlling volume. So let's say we are using a mood that's controlling pressure. That means I am controlling the mechanical breath delivery by controlling the amount of pressure that's delivering the volume. If I'm talking about or using a mood that controls volume, that means I'm delivering the mechanical breath based on an amount of volume delivered to the patient. The second classification we have is mechanical breath type. We have three basic breath type mechanical ventilation we'll give to the patient. We have the mandatory breath, we have the assisted breath, we have the spontaneous breath. The mandatory breath is basically machine breath. It's a controlled breath. The machine is controlling when to initiate the breath, when to end the breath, how to cycle the breath, everything. The machine is controlling the breath based on a set settings. The RT will set the mood. The assisted breath is a combination between patient effort and the machine control. So the patient will start or initiate or trigger the breath, then the machine will deliver the controlled breath or assist the patient to deliver the breath. Spontaneous breath, I have here. Okay, so this is a spontaneous breath. Spontaneous breath is controlled by the patient. So the patient will decide when to start, when to end, how much volume, how much pressure, how fast the breath is going to take, how slow. It's all on the patient. Okay, so we're going to talk now about the phase variable. Now the phase variable, this is the third classification. We have trigger. Trigger is, for those who's not RTs or never worked with ventilators, trigger is a medical term for breath initiation. So the breath initiation is either by the machine will start the breath, or by the patient will decide when to trigger or initiate the breath. If we chose a mood that works with machine trigger or machine initiation, the ventilator will initiate the inspiratory breath. Whereas the patient trigger is divided by two triggers. This kind of trigger is worked based on pressure signal or flow signal. The pressure signal the patient will not be able to start the breath unless the patient make a negative pressure, make a difficult effort to deliver the breath. So usually we start or we set the pressure signal by negative pressure. So we're going to allow the patient to work for the breath. The patient will be able to take So the patient will be able to make a negative pressure. This pressure, the ventilator will understand this negative pressure as a pressure signal, and then it will be giving the patient the breath or assisting the patient with the breath. The flow signal, we have in all the ventilators, we have something we call base flow. So the base flow is the flow inside the ventilator circuits. So it's a flow from inspiration circuit, expiration circuit. So this flow, the idea of it is to clear or to clean or wash out CO2 from the ventilator circuits. So let's say, for example, I'm using, or the flow that I'm using, the flow base is 10 liters. And I'm sitting the patient with flow trigger. So once the patient is inhaling this base flow with inspiration, the patient making effort, the inspiratory base flow will get out from the machine 10 liters, and then the patient will inhale, let's say 5 liters, and then it's going to go back to the expiratory circuit with only 5 liters. This will translate to the patient that this patient is making an effort. So give him or assist him with the breath. So this is basically, or in general, the idea of trigger. Limits. Limits are the second phase variable for the mood. Limits are basically setting a limit for our mood. So it's either pressure limit, volume limit, or flow limit. So if we decided to put a pressure limit, let's say I am telling or setting a pressure limit of 30 centimeter of water, that means the inspiratory pressure will not exceed 30 centimeter of water. If I set the limit with volume, that means a specific amount of volume will be delivered to the patient. The patient has a limit not to exceed this volume. Or if I choose a flow, the patient will not be able to exceed the flow amount. The last phase variable we have is cycle. Cycle is basically the phase of inspiration, expiration. Inspiration, expiration. Inspiration is the first phase, expiration is the second phase. So the cycle of the breath will go based on what? Or will cycle based on what? We can set it based on pressure, and some mood will set it based on volume. So once the pressure is reached, the inspiratory phase will end and the expiratory will cycle. If it's set with volume, the volume will reach, inspiratory phase is done, expiratory phase will begin. Same as flow or time. Most of the new moods here are using time. So once the inspiratory time is in, the expiratory phase will start. Okay, here we have a view of a screen of a ventilator. We can see in the upper left corner the name of the mood. So it's basically telling us what mood are we using. This is the waveform. The machine is translating the mechanical breath based on a graphs or waveforms. We have a pressure wave, flow wave, volume wave, and here in the bottom we have the set settings. Set settings are the basic settings to monitor the mood. So if you are using a mood and you're not setting appropriate set settings, that means this mood is not set properly for this patient. The measured settings are settings to monitor our mechanical breath delivery. So the measured settings will show us how much Expiratory tidal volume is getting out of the patient. If there's a leak, I can tell from the measured settings. I can also monitor the pressure if I'm reaching a high pressure with a patient. We're going to go in details about the set and the measured settings. The last here we have the additional settings. Additional settings is based on each company of the ventilator. So some companies will have additional settings for, let's say, expiratory parameters. They will put it here. Some companies will have nebulization settings. And it depends on the company of the ventilator. We're also going to see the alarm settings here, the ventilator changing mood. It's also in the additional settings. Okay, now we're going to talk about the set and the measured settings and mechanical ventilation. We're going to start with the volume parameters. Volume parameters are the most important parameters in setting a mechanical breath. We usually initiate a mode that controls the volume. We're only going to use a mode that controls or use pressure parameters if the patient's lung is at risk of pneumothorax, the pressure is getting high, the compliance of the patient is in a risk for injury. So we're going to start with tidal volume. So tidal volume is a set setting. Generally, we're going to set it from 6 to 8 ml per kg. If there is a case, like say for example, ARDS, we're going to set it from 4 to 6. And for obstructive disease, we're going to set it from 4 to 8. So it usually depends on the patient. And here is the calculation of, here, if you see that calculation here, the formula. This is the how to calculate the tidal volume. So we're going to calculate the tidal volume based on the patient's ideal body weight. For males, we're going to use 0.94. Multiplied by the ideal body weight, multiplied by 6 to 8, and then you will have the tidal volume. For females, we're just going to change the number factor here. We're going to change it from 0.94 to 0.88, and then the same formula. The second setting we have here is respiratory rate. Respiratory rate is usually set with a normal range of respiratory rate for normal people. So let's say from 12 to 20 or 15 to 20, the normal breath. And for patients with acute lung diseases or acute lung injuries, we're going to use a higher rate. We're going to go up to 20 to 30. And for obstructive diseases, we may use from 8 lower to 15. And then we're going to have inspiratory time. Inspiratory time is one of the set settings. Now each settings I marked with red is a measured setting. But the settings in black are the set settings. So inspiratory time will be set from 0.8 to 1.2. And it's usually as long as the IE ratio is normal for the patient, and the normal IE ratio is 1 to 2. Or by desired or the appropriate IE ratio for the patient.
Asma, if you may please move to the modes. We will discuss this in more details later. You have 15 minutes remaining.
Okay, we're going to go back. Okay, so this is the mood categories. We have control moods. We have continuous mandatory moods. We have continuous spontaneous moods, synchronized moods, and adaptive pressure control mood, and patient control mood. First, we have the control moods. Control moods are the basic moods that are designed for delivering positive pressure ventilation. We have volume control ventilation, pressure control ventilation. So the volume control ventilation, by the name of it, it's control mood. So the control variable for it is volume. It delivers a mandatory breath, and then the phase variable will be triggered by the patient, by the machine. Limits by the volume, cycle by the volume and time. And the